St. Louis is struggling, and something needs to change.
If we continue to do what we've done for the last 30 years in this region, we're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
But is that desperate push for economic development moving in the right direction?
We have every bit of evidence that this is going to fail.
The way we shape our economy is critical for all of us because it determines how we provide for our families.
We've been trying to get an interview with you for a couple of months. Can you talk with us?
News 4 investigates how the most powerful people in the region are selling St. Louis to the world.
You obviously have a hostile agenda.
You just described me as hostile.
Yes, right.
But you can't tell me why.
Right.
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 Okay.
No.
Do you really believe this is the way you should carry yourself as the chief executive of a regional chamber of commerce?
Do you believe that you should just be a hatchet job reporter?
St. Louis has trailed the nation as a whole when it comes to creating jobs. It's been like that for many years. The St. Louis Regional Chamber and Growth Association, our version of a chamber of commerce, is the group typically relied on to sell St. Louis to the world. But at the beginning of the year, when we started looking at the RCGA and how it conducted business, the chamber's top executive decided our questions were hostile and he would have nothing to do with us.
Mr. Fleming, Craig Cheatham, Channel 4, hoping we can talk with you.
For months, this was as close as we could get to Dick Fleming. Our investigation found that he was the highest paid Chamber of Commerce president in the country for the 2-year period of 2008-09, making $1.8 million in salary and deferred compensation during one of the worst recessions in U.S. history. I hoped he would explain the RCGA's mission and how he earned that money, but Fleming repeatedly refused.
Can you explain the mission of the RCGA? Sir, we've been trying to talk. We've been trying to talk with Mr. Fleming for 2 months. Can we talk with you outside very briefly before this gets started?
Why don't you let me get my thoughts together for a presentation here and do the courtesy of that?
Dick Fleming arrived at the RCGA 17 years ago and has dramatically increased its size and services. But despite that, job growth in the region has been flat for the last 2 decades. And some local leaders told me that the RCGA provided little, if any, help when they needed it.
Fenton Mayor Dennis Hancock says the RCGA was nowhere to be found after Chrysler announced its plan to close the Fenton plant.
Have you heard anything from the RCGA about what could be done to replace Chrysler and how they could help you?
No.
Not in 3 years?
No.
What did you gain from your membership in the RCGA?
I don't know that we gained a lot.
Did you gain anything?
Well, it's hard to put any tangible, point to anything tangible and say this is what we got for our membership.
When it needed to cut the budget, Fenton decided to end its membership in the RCGA. That membership cost only $900 a year.
Seriously, you don't think the RCGA membership is worth $900 a year to the city of Fenton?
We didn't feel that we were getting $900 worth of value out of it, no.
How has the RCGA helped the St. Louis area grow over the last 20 years? You're looking away.
You're going to have to ask that question again.
Is that really that tough of a question?
Well,
Maggie Hales is the Deputy Director of the East-West Gateway Council of Governments, a St. Louis group focusing on economic research and the distribution of federal highway funding. Gateway has 24 board members, 12 elected officials from Missouri, another dozen from Illinois. It would seem that RCGA and Gateway would be logical partners, but Hales says they're not.
some of our Illinois members have not been happy with RCGA's approach, and so that's been a problem. We really need to work together and include Illinois, and I think many of our Illinois members don't feel RCGA has done an effective job at that.
At representing them.
St. Clair County used to contribute $60,000 a year to the RCGA, but County Board Chair Mark Kern says that stopped years ago because county officials couldn't see the Chamber's impact on the local economy.
We really couldn't point to any business expansion or new businesses coming in that we could really attribute to what RCGA was doing for us.
St. Clair County, one of the largest and fastest growing in the region, hasn't even been an RCGA member for years. Part of that comes down to the way the Chamber spent its money during a terrible economy.
Flat job growth
and you're so disenchanted with the organization that you drop out. You say they had no impact on St. Clair County. And during that period of time, Mr. Fleming is the highest paid chamber president in America. Does that make any sense to you at all?
Well, that's why we got out.
Fleming's critics say there is also a sense of entitlement at the RCGA. In 2009 tax filings, the chamber reported spending nearly $500,000 for office space in a downtown skyscraper and more than $38,000 a year on leased automobiles, like this Infiniti driven by Fleming. After we looked at those records, we requested Fleming's expense reports, but the regional chamber, private organization, didn't give them to us. They didn't have to. When we approached him after his speech in April, Mr. Fleming walked out a back door. We found him hiding in a service hallway near a stack of plastic milk crates. Mr. Fleming, why don't you just talk to us?
Because
we've been trying to get an interview with you for 2 months. Here you are hiding in a hallway.
No, I'm waiting for lunch.
We angered him by requesting his expense reports, but Fleming didn't want to talk about anything else either, unless he could insult me personally and professionally.
I am readily available to anyone in the media who wants to do a straight story. You don't do straight stories. You
don't think I ever
well,
do
maybe you
straight
have. Maybe you've done. Maybe in your history. Maybe in your history. Maybe in your history. Possibly.
Possibly.
But your antagonistic and belligerent questions
Which
were
include
obvious.
what? Which include what?
From 3 months ago, I'm supposed to carry that around in my head.
You just described me as hostile.
Yes, right.
But you can't tell me why.
Right.
Okay.
No.
Even though Fleming refused to discuss the chamber's business, we went to the RCGA website for some answers. It talks over and over again about the group's accomplishments, the lobbying, the marketing campaign, and thousands of jobs credited partly to the group's involvement. It's a story you'd think Dick Fleming would want to share with anyone, even me.
Thank you.
Sir, I don't appreciate being called hostile when clearly I'm just trying to get some questions answered. Mr. Fleming, please, seriously.
Look,
do you really believe this is the way you should carry yourself as the chief executive of a regional chamber of commerce?
Do you believe that you should just be a hatchet job reporter?
I'm not a hatchet job reporter.
Well,
I'm trying to get questions answered that I think are reasonable questions. You've dodged an interview. You've walked in the back hallway of a hotel.
I'm going into a luncheon,
is
which
this
you
the way you
rudely
always
interrupt me
I've
to.
rudely interrupted.
You have rudely interrupted. You interrupted the presentation.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
No, we walked out before you gave your presentation, sir. Can you explain what you've done as president and chief executive to earn the $1.8 million in salary and deferred compensation that you had in 2008 and 2009?
You can run your agenda by yourself, pal. Okay?
PR firms from across the country tell me that they use Fleming's hallway interview as an example of how not to deal with the media. Several months after that incident, Fleming agreed to sit for a series of on-camera interviews, and those conversations will be part of our program. When we come back, why was the Regional Chamber of Commerce against a local effort that almost everyone agreed would be good for St. Louis? 3 months after our interview with Dick Fleming in that hotel service hallway, we learned that the RCGA's president and CEO refused to support a proposal by a different nonprofit group that appeared to be good for the region. The leading politicians and business leaders supported it, but not Fleming. Our investigation found that it appears one of the reasons he was against it is that he wasn't involved in it.
I've supported Dick, but unfortunately, Dick has disappointed me on this issue.
Ed Hillhouse is the executive director of the East-West Gateway Council of Governments, the metro agency responsible for distributing federal transportation funds to the region. Gateway also conducts research. Fleming refused to support Gateway's proposal for a comprehensive regional business plan created by the prestigious Brookings Institution.
I have been baffled. I really have. I've questioned why.
Brookings had already created plans for Seattle, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Northeast Ohio. All 24 public officials on the East-West Board of Directors, including St. Louis Mayor Slay and St. Louis County Executive Dooley, supported it. The leading pro-business groups also endorsed it, but not the RCGA.
What possible reason would he have to not support this?
One of the reasons that he gave me was that we already have studies going on. We're already doing it. We're already doing things that will work, and
that RCGA has
yes.
things that will work.
Yes.
Hillhouse said that it appeared Fleming wanted RCGA to be in charge of the project, not East-West Gateway. Hillhouse told me that Fleming attended a Brookings conference in Washington, D.C., and allegedly told Hillhouse that he had approached Brookings with his concerns about East-West proposal for St. Louis.
What he did say was that he had talked with them. He wanted me to know that he knew all of them personally, and that he served on the advisory board, and that he had talked with them about his concerns, and he said, and he told me, he says, and they have concerns also.
Fleming agreed to talk with us after we told the RCGA about our interview with Ed Hillhouse.
Why aren't you supporting East-West Gateway's proposal to bring the Brookings Institution in here for a study?
Well, it's not a question of whether we are or are not supporting it.
My question was, Mr. Fleming, you're not answering the questions, Mr. Fleming.
Can I finish an answer to
You didn't answer the question. Why aren't you supporting the plan?
When will you allow me to respond?
Please.
Good. When we first became aware of the Brookings proposal, sometime in March, our question was, how does what is being proposed by East-West Gateway relate to the work that the community and the RCGA had just finished spending 18 months on in a regional economic development plan? Very legitimate question, very reasonable question, I believe. That question was never responded to by East-West Gateway.
Our investigation found that at the time when Gateway was getting letters of support for its proposal, Fleming was privately raising doubts about it, partly because it didn't include him, even though he tried hard to convince us that he never did that. This is what he told me on July 5th.
It's hard for me to share a concern about a proposal that I didn't even know had been submitted and had never seen. So it was very difficult to critique something that until Friday I didn't see.
But 3 months before he told us that, Fleming tried to convince Henry Weber, the executive vice chancellor for administration at Washington University, that the RCGA should be involved in the Gateway proposal to Brookings. According to an email sent by Weber, Fleming presented a strong argument. Not long after Weber's meeting with Fleming, sources say Washington University became much less interested in playing a key role, though the university denies that.
How can I discuss a proposal that we don't even know exists, that we didn't even see until Friday?
Fleming repeatedly insisted his organization wasn't kept in the loop, but it was. Gateway revealed its interest in the Brookings plan in 3 meetings that were held from mid-March to early April. An RCGA employee was at each meeting.
It sounds like before the proposal was actually filed on May the 2nd, that RCGA was in the loop.
No.
You don't feel like RCGA was in the loop despite those briefings on the plan?
No.
For 9 minutes in our interview, Fleming strongly implied that he had never talked with Brookings about the Gateway proposal. Finally, he admitted that he had.
The fact that there was no proposal made that a moot question. I just told you that 2 weeks ago.
But it doesn't matter if you had not seen the proposal, if you had concerns.
Nor know that there was one.
Sir, my question was, did you ever talk to the folks at Brookings about anything relating to what you knew was an East-West Gateway interest in this Metro business plan?
I had one call after the April meeting, which a Brookings staffer was concerned about a statement that had taken place in the meeting that I was not in attendance, talking about the political fragmentation of St. Louis.
A few days after we first reported on this story, Brookings rejected Gateway's proposal for that business plan. According to Gateway, Brookings said two of the reasons cited for turning it down was the lack of unanimous support from the business community and a lack of involvement from Washington University. What impression did that leave with you when you saw this fall apart?
Well, I will tell you that we certainly didn't put our best foot forward on a national level with a very prestigious organization.
St. Louis Mayor Francis Slay and many other public officials who wanted the Brookings business plan were embarrassed by the infighting and poor communication that doomed the effort.
I think it kind of put a black mark or a black eye on the city in terms of how we approach these things.
The Brookings Institution insists the RCGA's lack of support did not kill the East-West Gateway proposal. Brookings has encouraged St. Louis to apply again for a regional business plan. This time, the RCGA will be involved. When we come back, how transparent is the organization selling us to the world, especially when it spends public money? Last year, the St. Louis Regional Chamber and Growth Association raised $2.9 million for its annual economic development program. Nearly 90% of that money came from private businesses, but St. Louis County gave the RCGA $200,000, and county officials weren't exactly thrilled with the results.
I would grade their performance as being okay with the ability to improve.
Despite that lukewarm endorsement, Denny Coleman, the president and CEO of the St. Louis County Economic Council, says the RCGA has helped the county connect with businesses and overall has probably earned the money it gets from St. Louis County. But he admits he doesn't really know how the chamber has spent $2 million in county funds during the last decade.
We put that money into the general fund for the Regional Economic Development Campaign. We do have a contract that says what we expect in return for our investment, but we don't tie specific dollars to specific functions.
They can spend it any way they want.
In essence.
True?
Let me add a piece to that.
That's true, though?
Since you're referencing the economic development
Mr.
fund
Fleming,
itself. In fairness, if I'm asking you a direct question at this point in the interview, I'd really appreciate if you give me a direct answer. I'm running out of time. Okay. I know you've got to get moving. Yeah.
In fairness.
Okay.
All right. Is that true?
It's true, but the county executive serves on the board of trustees of the economic development campaign that goes through extensive oversight and approval of every expense that is made, and that board of trustees includes the mayor, Alan Dunstan, Steve Ellman, and Charlie, in addition to business leaders.
So what you're telling me is that they have signed off personally on the way RCGA spends city, county, other municipalities' money?
Of all the money.
So Fleming says 4 elected officials personally approved all of the money in that almost $3 million campaign. Well, that came as a shock to those 4 elected leaders.
First off, I haven't signed off on anything.
Madison County Board Chair Alan Dunstan isn't sure how the RCGA spends that money, since he and other elected officials are non-voting members who don't see detailed budgets, much less an expense report.
We don't get into the line items of the way money is spent. And I wasn't there when you interviewed Mr. Fleming, so I don't want to say too much more than that. But we do not make those decisions.
The other elected and non-voting officials on the RCGA's Board of Trustees, St. Louis Mayor Francis Slay, St. Louis County Executive Charlie Dooley, and St. Charles County Executive Steve Ellman, all confirmed that they, like Dunstan, do not have a deep understanding of how that money is spent, and they do not approve budgets.
And we are
During a recent conference in St. Louis, 3 executives from chambers in Nashville, Oklahoma City, and Kansas City all preached the importance of transparency.
It's pure partnership.
The Nashville Chamber's Janet Miller provided us with a copy of a contract with Nashville-Davidson County, the Chamber's final report to Nashville, and a breakdown of costs for a recent Chamber trip to New York.
If a government entity gives you money for a specific purpose, like job attraction, you can itemize how you spent that money.
Sure, absolutely. Every penny of it.
And you're willing to do it.
Of course, of course.
Miller also says Nashville has audited some of the Nashville Chamber's expenses. As part of a written agreement with the RCGA, St. Louis County has the right to audit the way the RCGA spends St. Louis County money. But it has never done so, even though St. Louis County publicly questioned RCGA spending on a highly paid consultant 7 years ago. In 2004, News 4 discovered that the RCGA paid $1.4 million to management consultant David Levin. Levin, shown here in an RCGA video, claimed to be psychic. In a magazine article about his psychic family, Levin's wife and 15-year-old son insisted they had clairvoyant powers too.
I would have appreciated a little more directness on this from Mr. Levin.
Fleming worked with Levin for 7 years at the RCGA, paying him about $200,000 a year, which was more than any RCGA executive except Fleming. Sources say Levin, who rented this apartment in University City, had input on who should be hired and fired at the RCGA, though Fleming denied it at the time. Fleming did admit that Levin interviewed top executives in the region, giving Fleming background about the executives and what they wanted out of the regional chamber.
Did you know David Levin was acclaimed clairvoyant?
No, I didn't.
All the years you knew him.
My knowledge of David Levin is in the context of him being a good management consultant with a lot of spiritual orientation.
Though Fleming denied knowing about Levin's alleged powers, sources say Levin was open about his claims. But when Levin's role at the RCGA turned into a local joke, Fleming fired him.
We severed our relationship with him.
At the time of the scandal and during a recent interview, Fleming insisted that the RCGA is transparent.
I know what many of the chambers around this country do, and I know we're considered best practice in that.
At the time of the Levin scandal, the St. Louis Business Journal reported the RCGA's annual consulting budget was $700,000, and that Dick Fleming could spend the money any way he wanted without board approval. The next year, the RCGA approved a financial manual requiring Fleming to get full board approval for any consulting deal worth more than $100 grand a year. But under that policy, Fleming still has the authority to spend up to $50,000 per contract any way he wants without the approval of anyone else. When we come back, how does our chamber market St. Louis, and how do we know if it works?
I moved to St. Louis from New York City.
I'm from Glendale, Maryland.
Atlanta, Georgia.
St. Louis relies on the RCGA to market us as a region with print ads and videos. But critics of the RCGA say some of the most effective spots selling St. Louis have been done by people ignored by the corporate and civic power brokers who fund and control the RCGA.
Welcome down, guys. Wow, where are you guys from?
All over.
All right, well, welcome down. Just sit wherever you need to.
The Royale Food and Spirits is the kind of place rarely sold by the people selling St. Louis.
It's actually really good. I had some of this last night, too.
Owner Stephen Fitzpatrick Smith has a deep and affordable menu.
For you?
I'm going to have the burger.
But we're not here for lunch. Nearly a decade ago, Smith and photographer Mark Sipp produced a series of artistic but edgy 30-second spots about life in the city. They included pieces about exploring neighborhoods with public art, the Soulard Market, and cinema in the city at City Museum. The spots produced for the group Metropolis cost about $2,000.
I had originally contacted the RCGA about doing these spots, and I gave them sort of a brief outline of what I was looking to do, and I contacted Dick Fleming and every single person that I could contact in the organization about it.
But he says the regional chamber showed no interest in the project.
Do I have a place at the table? Not necessarily me, but there could be other people like me.
The RCGA, the organization widely viewed as the most responsible for selling St. Louis, takes a much more traditional approach to marketing the city and some of its executives. In 2009, the regional chamber spent nearly $1.5 million on marketing and media relations for its economic development initiative, and has spent millions more in recent years, though the RCGA wouldn't say how it spent that money. The RCGA's videos look very professional, and some of them provide the kind of personal glimpses into St. Louis life that were found in the tiny budget of Stephen Fitzpatrick Smith. But it's not clear how they're used, who sees them, or the impact all of that has on St. Louis. The chamber has claimed millions of people have seen these videos and print ads marketing the region. Fleming declined an interview to discuss how the chamber actually sells St. Louis.
Have they done a good job selling the city?
Not that I've been aware of, really. They haven't seen anything that's really come out of there that I've felt that has really hit anything right on the mark.
In recent years, the RCGA has used the Perfectly Centered, Remarkably Connected campaign, pushing the quality of life, low cost of living, and opportunities for business in St. Louis.
We're getting our money's worth from the RCGA.
St. Louis Mayor Francis Slay says the city gives the regional chamber $100,000 a year, about the cost of 2 lower to mid-level employees.
The power that they bring to the table with the advertisement, the marketing, the business community, and all the money that they put in, I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar expenditure on economic development that they spend to promote the region and the city, which we benefit from.
The chamber refused to provide us with copies of its videos.
Hello, I'm Dick Fleming, President and CEO of the St. Louis Regional Chamber and Growth Association, the RCGA.
We got these from the RCGA's YouTube channel. On that channel, some of these spots are watched an average of only once every 3 weeks.
Now, it says to me that they're not necessarily quite as in touch as they should be.
We tried repeatedly to get in touch with RCGA board members who are, in effect, Dick Fleming's bosses. We requested interviews with current board chair Tom Voss, the CEO of Ameren, and previous board chair Bob Reynolds, the CEO of Graybar Electric, but they both refused to talk with us. We wanted to ask them why they made Dick Fleming the highest paid chamber president in America during a recent 2-year period, and many other questions. But to get their views of the RCGA, we had to watch their tribute videos on YouTube.
Economic developers should be held accountable for what they deliver.
During a recent interview, Fleming boasted about the RCGA's role in creating jobs during his 17 years as chamber president.
From when I was recruited here in August of 1994 to today, there's been a net 100,000 in jobs, even with the deepest recession that we've had since 50 years.
The St. Louis economy, in terms of job creation, has been terrible.
Professor Jack Strauss, the director of St. Louis University's Simon Center for Regional Forecasting, says during Fleming's leadership of the RCGA, the St. Louis region has actually created about 85,000 jobs, which Strauss says is nothing to brag about.
Even if it was 100,000, right? St. Louis has created jobs at half the rate of the nation as a whole. We've created jobs at a much slower rate than Kansas City, at a much slower rate than Indianapolis, than Denver, than nearly all cities you can name that are our size. Well, clearly the RCGA does not pay for performance, because if they did pay for performance, he would not be the highest paid. He would be less than average, because our performance in terms of job creation is substantially less than average.
Since Mayor Slay considered the RCGA's marketing a bargain, we asked the city if it would show us any economic development that it could credit to the direct involvement of the regional chamber. We made that request 2 weeks ago, and the city still hasn't given us a single example. When we come back, we investigate the China Hub project, who wins, who loses, and why some critics say it's destined to fail.
I've never seen such foolhardy, unaccountable public policy around an air cargo effort in North America in my 20 years in the business.
Lambert International used to be one of the busiest airports in America. But after 9/11 and the loss of the American Airlines hub, Lambert is now a mid-sized airport with far fewer direct flights and $1.4 billion in debt. But the people selling St. Louis think they've discovered a way to turn around the struggling airport and the entire region. They call it the big idea.
I think at its essence, the reason it's called the big idea is that it has transformational potential for our region.
That big idea, according to Dick Fleming, is the plan to create a massive international cargo operation at Lambert Airport that he says could pump billions of dollars into our economy. The focus is on Chinese cargo, which is expected to grow much faster than freight shipped from the rest of the world.
The magnitude of what we're talking about here is so substantial.
Fleming says a China hub in St. Louis would also be an ideal spot for South American and Midwest cargo to fill Chinese planes for the flights back to China. According to the RCGA, the hub has the potential to create 18,000 direct, indirect, and induced construction jobs during the next 8 years, and an additional 11,000 permanent jobs to maintain the operation of warehouses and other air cargo related businesses.
I've been involved in economic development for 35 years. The magnitude of this project is greater than any single economic development opportunity I've ever experienced, and I think many people involved in economic development here see it as that.
Is a China hub at Lambert Airport really such a big idea?
No, it's not.
Jack Strauss, the director of the St. Louis University Regional Forecasting Center, believes even if the China hub is successful, it will have less of an economic impact on the region than an auto plant.
So it's not a game changer in St. Louis.
If you wanted to know how credible we are and how credible this could be, the litmus test for that is the Chinese, not a guy sitting in St. Louis University.
Mike Jones is the chair of the Midwest China Hub Commission, a group dedicated to making the so-called big idea a reality. Jones says Strauss and others not involved in negotiations with the Chinese are simply guessing at what's going on and the impact it will have on St. Louis.
He's like somebody bought a ticket to the ball game and telling you that something's wrong with Albert's swing. Okay, I mean, he's entitled to that opinion, but Albert's not going to pay that any attention. And so I'm too late in the game to care what a guy at St. Louis Shoot thinks about this. We're going to close this out.
The key to closing the deal is the Aerotropolis bill. Aerotropolis is a concept that believes you can build a city around a thriving airport. The bill before the Missouri legislature would provide huge tax breaks for private investors, including up to $300 million in tax credits for the construction and equipment costs of developers who will build warehouses.
None of these tax credits are issued prior to any developer building. You have to build the facility, invest your dollars, prove that you're putting cargo in and out of flights traveling internationally out of Lambert, show that you've got jobs affiliated with that, and then you can apply for the tax credit over a 5-year period. So there aren't any, and if no one ever builds, a dollar is never spent.
Lambert's director, Rhonda Homney-Briggy, says those tax credits are spread out over a period of up to 15 years. She says the airport has enough warehouse space to handle a few international cargo flights a week, but it needs much more to turn Lambert into an international cargo hub. Is this a if we build it, they will come idea?
No.
But in some ways, it is. And the more News 4 learned about the Midwest China hub, the more questions we had about it.
We have every bit of evidence that this is going to fail.
Mike Weber, an air cargo consultant who has worked with some of the biggest airports in the country, says Lambert is a terrible choice for an international cargo hub. He says that's because Lambert's landing fees are among the highest in the country, and there's already an abundance of vacant warehouse space at large cargo airports, including some located in the Midwest.
I've never seen such foolhardy, unaccountable public policy around an air cargo effort in North America in my 20 years in the business.
Weber admits a St. Louis China hub could cost O'Hare International Airport in Chicago additional business. Weber is under contract with a consultant who does work with O'Hare, but he insists he's only speaking out because the St. Louis project is doomed, and he says Lambert's failure will hurt funding for more legitimate cargo efforts.
But this is just thievery.
Weber and Strauss aren't the only critics.
I don't think this is the best investment for Missouri.
Amy Bluen is the executive director of the Missouri Budget Project, an independent nonprofit research group that focuses on budget and tax issues. Bluen says the bill doesn't require that a warehouse export a single piece of cargo to get tax credits, and there are no requirements that businesses use Lambert after they are no longer eligible for tax breaks.
We want something as a society that's going to help us with our unemployment rate and help our communities rebuild. This is just not, as it's written currently, the way to go about it.
You could get these tax credits even if you build a warehouse 50 miles away from the airport.
Audrey Spalding, a policy analyst with the Show Me Institute, another statewide think tank, says market research by the firm C.B. Richard Ellis shows that there is 18 million square feet of vacant warehouse space just on the Missouri side of the metro area.
I haven't seen any public demonstration that we're missing warehouse space in St. Louis.
Despite that, only new construction will qualify for the tax credits.
There's absolutely nothing to lose by going after the China hub.
St. Louis Mayor Francis Slay is still convinced the hub can work, partly based on a study conducted by Ed Monser, the chief operating officer for Emerson Electric, ranked by Fortune magazine as the 120th biggest corporation in the country.
He has been to China over 100 times. He understands this very well. He actually did a feasibility study. He believes this can work. His conclusion is that this can work, and he can talk to you about that better than I can.
Monser, identified repeatedly as a point man on the China Hub project, not only refused to talk with us, he also declined to provide us with a copy of the study.
So if somebody has a study out there showing that this could work, I think that should be shared broadly with the public and with the taxpayers.
Who else is pushing for the China Hub, and how will it benefit them? McEagle Properties is developing 2 massive sites near the airport, totaling more than 700 acres. If China Hub operations are built off the airport grounds, McKee and his partners would appear to be at the front of the line.
He was one of the original proponents of this. But this is way bigger than Paul McKee. I mean, he would be a very small part of the whole thing if this thing turns out the way we want it to be.
But McKee and his attorney Steve Stone actually appear to be a very big part of it. In fact, during the last 2 years, Stone has traveled to China 5 times as part of groups sponsored by the Midwest China Hub Commission. That's more than any of the politicians or direct managers of the commission or the airport. Stone and McKee did not respond to our request for interviews.
We didn't do a whole lot of business together.
St. Clair County Board Chair Mark Kern says 5 years ago, McKee and Stone were lobbying China to fly cargo to Mid-America Airport in Mascoutah, Illinois, which is about 40 miles southeast of Lambert. McKee was leasing warehouse space at Mid-America and would spend $683,000 on consultants to help bring Chinese freight there. The key consultant was Stephen Perry of London Export. Perry is Steve Stone's cousin.
Perry and his father have been working with the Chinese for 60 years. His dad led a delegation of British business leaders back in 1953 to meet with Mao, and that began trade relationships between the UK and China, and that has developed over time.
In a letter dated December 15, 2006, Perry wrote to then-Governor Blagojevich, Congressman Costello, and his cousin, Steve Stone. Perry mentioned that he held a series of meetings with high-ranking Chinese officials on behalf of Mid-America. Perry encouraged an Illinois delegation to meet in China in March of 2007. But the agreement reached between McKee and Mid-America began falling apart in the summer of '07. And just a few months later, Stephen Perry was pitching the so-called big idea to St. Louis politicians and Dick Fleming.
Do you think they took your idea?
I think certainly that our idea is a large part of their plan. The China to South America connection was a connection that was built here at Mid-America, was tested with test flights from China, with flights from South America. That hasn't occurred at Lambert. That's occurred here, and I think it shows that it can work in the region. We believe it works better at Mid-America.
London Export is now under a $450,000 a year contract with the Midwest China Hub Commission. That contract is paid for by a federal government grant.
Do you know how they're spending that $450,000 a year?
Internally? No, I don't. I mean,
does it matter?
Not really.
Federal taxpayers are also paying Steve Stone's law firm $180,000 a year for, quote, furthering the China Hub project, and $180,000 a year for Jason Van Eaton's company Spectrum to manage the Hub Commission. Van Eaton is the former deputy chief of staff for retired Senator Kit Bond. Bond helped get the federal grants paying for those contracts.
You tell me what is a transformational opportunity for a mid-level region that's in decline worth? Put a number on.
One of the numbers will likely be the tens of millions of dollars in tax credits for historic housing, the elderly, and the poor that will be cut back to justify the $360 million that could be available to businesses connected to Lambert's China Hub.
It helps me to pay things that I've been struggling with through the year. So it helped me to pay off those things and maybe get some other things that I need.
Odessa Hollingsworth receives about $300 a year from one of the tax programs facing cuts.
I feel that there are people in this country that live here and they have gave to their community, that the things that they're taken from us should not be taken from us. We should still be eligible for some of the benefits that will help us to be able to manage and to maintain.
There is always a price to pay for what our city leaders call progress. Since 2009, the Midwest China Hub Commission, funded largely by taxpayers, has spent $266,000 in public money, taking politicians, consultants, and executives to China.
If you're St. Louis, you don't really have a choice but to try to make a play like this.
Commission Chair Mike Jones says the region desperately needs to invest in the hub because the old strategy of local cities luring businesses from other nearby communities hasn't cut it.
If we continue to do what we've done for the last 30 years in this region, we're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Jones says the lifeboat could be China Hub. But who's really in charge of this project? In a series of emails obtained by the Show Me Institute, Stephen Perry seems to be calling the shots, and he criticizes the key players in the St. Louis area for not being on the same page.
Let me read you a couple of things from a Stephen Perry email. If this bill fails, then Lambert is beyond recovery. Have we really reached that point?
No, I don't think so. But, you know, he's our consultant in China, and
he's pretty dramatic guy, isn't he?
I think what happens in some of these cases, I mean, some of this stuff is salesmanship as well. What you need to do is you need to get people's attention and say, wait a minute, this is important.
It's the biggest sales job in many years, but there hasn't been a single independent study to see if it will even work.
It's a welfare program, a corporate welfare program.
For who?
For the real estate developers in the St. Louis area. And it's also a jobs program for a bunch of, consultants and lawyers who, frankly, there will never be a moment of accountability for any of these people. You can go back in 5 years and ask the RCGA and, the airport director in St. Louis and Paul McKee and his attorney and those folks. If you go back and ask in 5 years, whether or not it was worth it, they're going to tell you yes, because it wasn't their money to begin with.
The region's power brokers insist they've been open about the China Hub project, but not always. The Midwest China Hub Commission recently forced News 4 to refile an 8-day-old request for documents relating to those high-priced consultants, just because we didn't call it an open records request. We didn't have to, but the impact is the same. An 8-day delay to openness just before the legislature votes on the Aerotropolis bill at next week's special legislative session. Some final words when we come back.
Louis has so much going for it, but we seem determined to undermine ourselves. Even on no-brainer opportunities like the Brookings business plan, our so-called leaders fight each other, and we all pay the price. Dick Fleming retires from the RCGA at the end of the year. But this is much more than a story about Mr. Fleming, some politicians, and a few deals. We can't change what's happening in St. Louis until we change the way we are selling St. Louis. I'm Craig Cheatham. For all of us at News 4, thanks for watching.